Precisely the correct answer. There's the drinks trolley. Producer Susie is going to grab what, though? That's the question.
Well, I've gone for a drink from Vault City Brewing Company, which are based up in Scotland, which may give you a little clue. It's a sour, and it's Iron Brew beer.
Iron Brew beer?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And it smells and tastes exactly like Iron Brew.
Lovely.
Okay, I think I'd just rather have Iron Brew or a beer.
Okay.
Well,
Maybe have Iron Brew and then a beer.
Or an Iron Brew beer.
No, I don't think so.
Sounds good.
Anyway, thank you very much indeed. So today's confession comes from Baz. Thanks, Baz, for this. Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Susie, my confession dates back to September 2012. My wife Jane and I were in the middle of a house extension, and all year the weather had been awful. As it hadn't stopped raining, we needed to make the house watertight. We were fast running out of money to pay for windows and doors. The only money I had to spare was what I'd been saving up to take Jane away for her 50th birthday in November to Rome, which she was very excited about. After juggling the build on the extension and saving for the trip, we finally made it to Rome in September 2013 for my wife's belated birthday present. It was spectacular. Around every corner there were more Roman statues and ruins than you could shake a stick at. We went to the Colosseum, the Roman Forum, the Trevi Fountain, the Pantheon, the Spanish Steps, the lots more. We even saw the Italian Prime Minister leaving his residence and the spot where Julius Caesar was murdered. This was fantastic. We were loving walking around Rome and sampling the coffee and ice cream shops at every opportunity. Now, this time of year in Italy is usually warm and dry, and we were travelling light with only a small rucksack each, as we were only there for 4 nights. Therefore, we decided not to take an umbrella, but a much more compact and lighter pack-a-mac, which stuffed into its small bag with a picture of a Mac on it, and this was taken out of the drawer straight into my rucksack. And on the second day, we decided to visit St. Peter's Basilica in St. Peter's Square, which, to put the record straight, is oval. Okay. Now, unbeknownst to us, that's irrelevant to the story, but it's...
Oh, right. Okay, good.
Now, unbeknownst to us at the time, all first Sundays of the month, the Basilica was closed to the public as the Pope performs Mass. It is free to join him, but we couldn't get into the Basilica itself. We could only stand outside. Now, we're not religious, but what a story to tell that we personally had Mass with the Pope. I mean, not personally, because there were 20,000 other people as well. But who knew that? Yeah. Anyway, when in Rome and all that, the Pope emerged in front of the Basilica and proceeded to give Mass, if that's the right verb. We hadn't a clue what he was saying, as it was all in Latin. And after an hour, we couldn't take any more, so we decided to leave.
Couldn't take any more of that. Okay.
Well, we were only there for a few days and had other things to do. And Baz says, sorry, Pope.
Okay.
So I'm sure he'll forgive you. Well, I don't know. We carried on with our self-guided tour and decided the next day we would revisit St. Peter's Square, which is still an oval, and go to St. Peter's Basilica and the Sistine Chapel. Now, the weather was not as good as the previous day. Clouds were gathering, but we were okay because we had planned ahead and brought our pack-a-macs. Before we went in, we decided to eat our sandwiches, and as always, there were crowds there. Entrepreneurs as well, trying to sell you stuff that you don't actually need. On this occasion, umbrellas were being offered, as they could see lots of people had come unprepared. Ha! Not us. We'd packed our lightweight, versatile Macs. So I waved them away numerous times. Begone, salesman! And we proceeded to eat our lunch quietly, at the same time watching the game of cat and mouse between the police and the illegal umbrella sellers. The police were waiting on the sidelines and would storm in, and the sellers scattered to avoid being caught and fined. That seemed to be the cycle of the day. After lunch, we paid and entered St. Peter's Basilica and the Sistine Chapel, whilst the rain got a little heavier outside. It was amazing to see the Michelangelo paintings and inside the Basilica itself. Eventually, it was time to go, and we followed the crowd, which followed us outside where the heavens had opened and the rain was appropriately biblical. Everyone was reaching for their brollies, which they had brought from the entrepreneurial sellers, and I thought, well, more fool you. I have saved myself €5 with my pack-a-mac, which I duly extracted from its bag to find that actually it was the plastic trousers that I brought and not the Mac. It had been packed in the wrong bag and I never checked it beforehand. By this time, the rain had got even heavier. So to the great amusement of my wife and fellow tourists, who are now laughing out loud, I wrapped a pair of waterproof trousers around my head. which was not that effective. And I thought, well, what do I do? I'm going to get soaked. And there they were, the brolly sellers. Yes, it's time to swallow your pride and make a run for them.
Yeah.
At this point, the rain is now bouncing off the pavement, and the only thing was to make a run back for the cover of the colonnades to where the sellers were sheltering with armfuls of brollies. We made a dash, and the first one I saw, I asked how much for an umbrella. He said €5. I said €4. And the deal was done. I raised the brolly, and Jane and I were shielded from the torrential rain, aided, of course, by my waterproof trousers around my head. We were now standing next to the man who sold us the brolly with a smug look on his face. Cheapskate. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the police making their way over to the cellars, which were melting back into the shadows. But my seller couldn't see the police as we were in the way. Not one to like having been got on a sale like this, I waited until the policeman was very close, then shouted, here he is, look, it's him. And before he could run away, his collar was truly felt by the Vatican fuzz, and he was bundled into the waiting police van, much to the amusement of the very wet Swiss guard who was watching everything. Father Simon asked forgiveness from the Pope for leaving Mass early, but it was boring. The umbrella salesman, who was probably fined his whole day's takings, and mostly my wife Jane, who had to wait a year before she had her 50th birthday and then endure me for the rest of the break, moaning about how I'd packed the wrong waterproof and having to spend an extra €4. I mean, I suspect, to be honest, Baz is a bit of a cheapskate. I mean,
Yes.
you're on €4. Come on,
Yeah.
an ice cream is going to cost you $6 at least.
Indeed.
Anyway, let's see what Sister Susie makes of that performance.
Oh, well, Baz, do you know what? That was great. That had the image of you with those trousers wrapped around your head, looking very silly.
There's a Brit abroad for you.
It's properly tickled me. And I just think, I don't like the tat trolleys that sell all of the rubbish stuff too. So I kind of feel for you there. But maybe you are a bit of a cheapskate. So maybe I can't forgive you for that reason, because you would have embarrassed your wife having those trousers round your head.
Yes.
So maybe for that reason I can't forgive. But it was very funny.
Actually, I mean, now I'm thinking about it, unless it kind of melted under the water, €4 for an umbrella is pretty good price, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah.
Because what's that? It's about £3.50 for an umbrella. I mean, come on, Baz. Anyway, Brother Matthew.
Yeah, no, I'm going to forgive. And also, yeah, you're right. That doesn't sound too expensive for an umbrella. You'd have thought they'd have put the price up, bit of price gouging. Once it really started coming down. Dynamic pricing with your umbrellas.
Is that right?
You'd have thought. But they didn't. Good for them. And maybe the Pope could do with spicing up his sermons, Your Holiness.
I think it was just the fact it was in Latin that they didn't like.
There was that as well. Maybe lay off the Latin. But I'm going to forgive just for the phrase Vatican fuzz. I like that. That'll set me up for the week. So yes, I'm going to forgive.
Audere est facere Spiritus Sanctus. Who's the manager of Nottingham Forest?
He was,
of course.
wasn't he?
All right, okay. So do you forgive Baz? That's the question. Forgiveness or no? 61054 for the People's Verdict. Start your message with Simon. So the confession came from Baz. He and Jane went to Rome. They packed light because they were only there for 4 days. Mm-hmm. So it was fine. They didn't need an umbrella because they had their pack-a-mac. But then when the rain descended, Baz realised that he'd packed only the trousers, which he then wrapped around his head because he's a British person and he's abroad. And then he was complaining that he had to buy an umbrella for a terrible rip-off price of €4.
€4?
I would imagine you couldn't find an umbrella anywhere which cost less than €4. Yeah. But anyway, the People's Verdict is like this.
So Brian says not forgiven. What a cheapskate. It would have been different if the hawker had tried to raise the price, but to even knock him down from €5 was pretty bad. And then to dob him in? No. Unforgiven. But Jenny in Chester says forgiven just because it was hilarious and cheered up my Monday. He must have looked silly with those trousers over his head, so that was enough embarrassment. And Matt in Stowmarket says not forgiven. €5 sounds like an absolute steal, let alone 4. I was in Rome just 2 weeks ago, and those sellers are still out there. However, my foolish father, who hadn't packed a raincoat, paid €10 just for an emergency poncho. Anyway, for the reason of solely getting a better deal, I'm not forgiving.
An emergency poncho.
An emergency poncho for €10.
Wow, okay,
Yeah.
all right. That's a phrase I haven't heard before. Thank you very much for all the verdicts. If you have a confession, please send it to us, and if we use it, then you get a smart speaker. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. So we have this confession, which it's a little harsh, I think. It's a little bit strong
Okay.
to be included. But also it's not so bad that it has to be one of the ones that we can't broadcast.
Oh, I say. So we're skirting on the edge.
Yes. So I think we should probably put it in the podcast. Don't you think, Suze?
Yeah, it could go in the podcast.
I'm just making a non-air editorial decision.
So not the one we're about to do now?
No.
Okay.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, look, there's the drinks trolley. What do we grab? What are we having?
Oh, I think a very nice glass of red wine. So maybe a Tempranillo would be delicious right now.
A Tempranillo.
I don't know what that is.
If Sue says it's okay,
I'm sure it's fine.
We're going to go for that one.
Two of them.
Today's confession comes from Peter. He gets the smart speaker. Peter says, Simon and the Compassionate Cabal. My confession involves a very significant event in the mid-80s and my coming to terms with changes in the way we all handle our finances at that time. First, let's go back to a little further, actually, when I started working in a hospital in Bedfordshire in 1983. When I joined said hospital, I had to create a bank account. And so I joined the one that was the bank that was located just across the road from the A&E department for reasons that will become clear. I won't name which of the big banks it was at the time. Long before online banking was a twinkle in Steve Jobs' eye, the only way to withdraw cash, this is one for Holly really, is to you had to write yourself a check. Then you took it to the counter and they would then give you the amount of money that you'd written the check for. You'd written for cash and you put your name, and that's the way it worked. However, by 1988, the time of my shameful episode, my bank had joined the wave of innovation and had started introducing cash machines. ATMs were across the land. These were considered something of a blessing at the time. No longer did we have to stuff vast amounts of £1 notes, yes, they did exist, Holly, into our pockets when embarking on a day's merriment. And it was on this basis that I decided to travel with my newly minted banker's card to London on the 11th of June 1988 to join the Free Nelson Mandela March through the city, culminating in a number of highbrow speeches from well-known supporters of the movement in Hyde Park. During the march, we passed many branches of my bank, and several people chanted rude things about my bank. With just a bit of hypocrisy, I joined in those chants whilst enjoying a sense of smugness, knowing that I had one of their cards in my back pocket if I needed it. After all, I had £10 in notes in my pocket. Surely I wasn't going to need any more for this day. And that was the start of my downfall. As we approached Hyde Park, there were several hawkers trying to sell all sorts of tat to gullible out-of-towners like me. I was particularly drawn to a sweatshirt with a logo that was making a political statement that I didn't completely understand. It said, boycott South Africa, not Nicaragua. Anyway, it looked nice, so I decided to buy it. This left me with enough money to get a burger. And of course, I could withdraw some more money from those newfangled ATMs for the train fare home. Yes, I was going to need my credit card after all. I left Hyde Park proudly wearing my revolutionary T-shirt and a sweatshirt, I beg your pardon, as I had thrown my old Adam and the Ants T-shirt in the bin. It seemed a sensible thing to do. I then realised that it might be difficult to withdraw money from my local bank, as I might get duffed up by some of the protesters, as the logo on my sweatshirt might reveal my duplicity.
Wow.
2 miles of walking later, I spotted a Wimpy, and having acquired a takeaway burger, I placed it on the nearest cash machine and furtively typed in what I thought was my 4-digit code. However, my code didn't seem to work. I then recalled that I'd changed the code to something more memorable. But Father Simon, I couldn't remember what that was. No. And in a panic, I typed another possible code to be asked to try again, and had a third stab at my highly memorable code, once again ending in failure. Now, in those days, once your transaction was completed, a screen would come down over the keyboard.
Remember that? Yeah.
As I had taken the allotted 3 attempts to enter my passcode, the screen dutifully came down, trapping my still warm burger inside.
In the machine.
In the machine.
Lovely.
Resting on the numbers. I waited a while for someone to come up to the ATM so I could liberate my evening meal. But as time passed, it became obvious to me that it would have gone cold, and so I began to walk to St Pancras rather dejectedly. It was then that my next challenge became apparent to me. I had no money to get the train fare home, and it was a long journey home. I began to despair, because my cash card was, of course, still in the machine.
Yeah.
I began to despair, trying to think of a way of getting home, and then then a young man came up to me and said he liked my sweatshirt. I said he could have it for £7, which he agreed without any hesitation, and thus my problem was solved. I managed to get the return fare home. So here, obviously, I need forgiveness from not from the fellow protesters for chanting against my bank, as I'm sure I was not the only one who had an account with that bank that allegedly supported the regime at the time. But I don't know whether that's true or not.
Don't know. Yeah.
Nor am I seeking forgiveness from the man who bought my sweat-drenched top for the same price that I paid for it that afternoon, with the incomprehensible slogan that I didn't understand. No, Father Simon. I seek forgiveness from all my fellow passengers who had to put up with the sight of my somewhat pale-skinned, rotund and bare-chested body on the journey all the way home because I was topless.
Oh, right, okay.
Says Peter. I hope that this might be suitable. There's an element of politics, but it's only for context.
Well,
I think it is. And actually, the context is entirely appropriate, because without the politics, we wouldn't know why he was embarrassed about his bank
of course,
and then his sweatshirt and all that kind of stuff. But I don't fancy spending any kind of journey anywhere without a shirt on my back. I think that's a very wise thing. Anyway, I suspect Matt doesn't have much time for people like Peter. Susie, what do you say?
Well, Peter, I don't know. I don't know why you threw away your Adam and the Ants t-shirt.
That's
I feel like
the
if you
thing. That's
hadn't
where you
done
went
that,
wrong. Yep.
then everything would be fine.
Yep.
I just don't understand. And for that reason, I just can't forgive you.
Could have kept Adamant in his back pocket along with a credit card.
Yeah.
Brother Matthew.
Why is he wearing an Adam and the Ants top in 1988? That's what I want to know. A little bit beyond Adam and the Ants time, I think, there. They were very much out of the hit parade by that point, if I remember rightly.
Along with ASAP rapper.
ASC and his Rockies.
Oh,
and also, I'm not a big fan of people going topless on public transport. It's not my...
Particularly rotund.
No.
Pale-skinned people.
Doesn't quite float my boat. But we've all worn tops with ridiculous messages on it. I've got one in Spanish that I still don't understand. So for that reason,
what does it say?
I don't know. But that's the point, isn't it? Because I don't understand it. But looked very good. Never worked with the ladies. But never mind. For that reason, I'm going to forgive.
So you bought the T-shirt for the ladies. 61054 for the People's Verdict. Thank you. Anyway, more in just a moment. Just before the news, we had a little bit of 80s politics on our confession with Peter, who was on a demonstration in London, where one of the well-known banks was being given a hard time by the protesters because of what they perceived some of the things that the bank had been up to. But he was actually a customer for the bank, and so he was slightly embarrassed to go and get some money from the bank, from the cash point, which then consumed his card and the burger which he had rested on the numbers. Then he sold his sweatshirt and he went home topless. He had to be there, basically. That's the thing, in essence. The People's Verdict, here it comes.
Not forgiven, says Samantha. There's something wrong with people who don't wear a T-shirt on public transport. Yes. I know it's hot outside, but it's just wrong. Nigel Grimsby, I forgive him. But also, what about the person who found his cold manky burger trapped in the cash machine?
That's true.
Lol. And Paul from Runcorn says, I totally disagree with Matt. I still wear a T-shirt with Supertramp's farewell tour on 20-odd years later. So wearing an Adam and the Ants T-shirt only a few years after they disbanded is okay by me. But yes, he's forgiven.
Excellent point, Paul. Thank you. And thank you for all the verdicts. Appreciate that very much. Send your confession, please, maybe inspired by Peter, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's 5:46, Greatest Hits Radio, enjoying the sight of the drinks trolley flying past just in time for producer Susie to select what?
Classic gin and tonic. I've gone from Plymouth gin and Mediterranean tonic by Fever Tree, which is very tasty.
Matt would like a large one, please.
Yeah, gin and tonic for me, thanks.
Thank you very much. Now, just a word, when you get your verdicts in, can you get them in super fast, because everything's going to be done before 6 o'clock?
Yes.
Because, Mr. Springsteen is here. So, the verdict, 61054, send it in straight away.
Send it in now, if you could.
First word is Simon. You can say, I agree with Matt, and so on.
Yes.
Today's comes from Steph. Father Simon, Sister Susie, and brother from another gutter, Matthew. My confession dates back from the time of Blur versus Oasis, Forrest Gump and Pulp Fiction, Mad Cow Disease and the older, larger 50p coins. The mid-90s. Different, but not too different times. At this time in question, I was a 19-year-old student studying to one day hopefully make something of myself. It was one such Sunday morning, whilst living in my university dorms, that I awoke from my morning slumber. I felt the need for a wholesome kickstart to my day via the nutritional embrace of sugar and cocoa beans. I lived on a corridor, down which led a set of stairs. At these stairs lived a vending machine that sold a selection of crisps and chocolate bars. Breakfast! Aha! Student essentials for when the toaster was broken. Many a Sunday morning would see me searching through my trouser pockets to find spare change from the night before so that I could visit the machine and ease my way into the busy stresses of a student Sunday, which, as I recall, consisted mostly of not doing very much except for watching the omnibus edition of EastEnders and sometimes doing some clothes washing. I don't remember feeling particularly lucky that morning as I trundled off to the vending machine, but events would soon prove otherwise. I'd fumbled in my wallet and found a 50p, a standard run-of-the-mill regulation 1990s coin, albeit the older, larger type that were the norm back then. Susie and Holly, 50p was enough to buy a chocolate bar in the 90s.
Imagine that.
Yes.
I know that.
At the vending machine, I'm just saying these are the words on the confession from Steph.
Thanks,
At the
Steph.
vending machine, I looked through the glass window and decided upon a bar of Cadbury's Whole Nut, a staple classic, one that I'd eaten countless times before, and placed my coin into the slot. It made a few noises bouncing around inside the machine and then fell out at the bottom. This occasionally happened. I thought nothing of it. I bent and picked it back up to put it back in. But on doing so, I looked at the small red LED readout next to the coin slot, and it showed a 50p credit. Result? The machine had incorrectly credited my coin as well as ejecting it. I placed it back in. Same thing happened. It bounced around a few times, fell out the bottom. When I looked at the LED display, my credit had now risen to £1. Here I started to feel excited. I inserted my 50p again. Same thing happened. I put it through a few more times and then proceeded to buy all the Cadbury's Whole Nut bars in that particular row. The circular spinning thing kept on turning, and the chocolate bars moved forward and fell down into the tray each time. Blood started rushing to my head as I realized just what exactly was happening. I've never read or watched The Lord of the Rings, but I imagine that it centers around a ring exerting special powers. Well, that's what I had. Not too dissimilar to my magic 50p coin that morning. I inserted the special 50p over and over again and worked my way across each row, gradually emptying the contents, whether I liked the thing or not. I was on edge. I felt like the guy who always had to cut the wire that was connected to the bomb just before the timer was about to run out on pretty much every film from the 1980s. There was sweat on my brow that thickened each time I inserted the coin and hoped for the credit and the ejection. I was also worried that someone would come along and discover what I was up to. After what felt like hours, I burst through my bedroom door using my outstretched T-shirt as my makeshift swag bag and spilled every single chocolate bar and every single bag of crisps from the machine onto my bed. I must have had 100 bars and at least 20 packets of crisps, plus my magic Lord of the Rings 50p still in my hand. It was a moment of sheer joy, a time when the stars aligned and the magic was running my way. But obviously this is probably a criminal act somewhere, so I need to ask forgiveness from the owners of the vending machine, as I obviously cleared them all out. In my defense, during my 3 years at university, I probably did pay them back several times over with my confectionery purchases. Also ask forgiveness from my fellow students who found the machine empty for the rest of that day and could not satisfy their own chocolate cravings. Really, they should have been eating vegetables and fruit. That's what I'm saying. And I wish to make this known to Susie in particular. When friends called into my room over the next few days, they were all greeted not just with the usual offer of a hot beverage, but also the offer of a complimentary bar 6. Remember those? To snack on. Or a nice packet of Quavers. Father Simon asked forgiveness for my confectionery crimes. Told this story to friends many times over the years and use it as evidence of Lady Luck unexpectedly shining down on me. I continued to use that vending machine for the remainder of my time at university, but sadly, no such miracle ever presented itself again. But for that just one moment on that magical Sunday morning, Lady Luck was shining on me, and I took away every single thing that was in that vending machine. Sister Susie, in shock and outrage, she speaks.
Well, Steph, it does a bit like the TV programme in the 90s, which I think was called The Queen's Nose, which had a magic 50p in it. But I understand it wasn't your fault. But you were a bit greedy, even though you did share it. You didn't have to clean it out, did you? And also, I don't think I can forgive you just for picking Who picks whole nut as their chocolate of choice?
Well, I mean, fruit and nut is obviously the better choice. But whole nut.
Whole nut's good.
Well,
no.
Cadbury's get them and they cover them in chocolate.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Brother Matthew.
I'm going to forgive because it's the system, isn't it? It's the vending machine that was broken, or maybe the universe was manifesting the chocolate down through the thing, or the machine was broken. So one of those things was happening. But I'm going to forgive because all of us would have done the same. No, all of us would have done the same. If you got a magic 50p and you get free chocolate, all of us are taking the free chocolate. So
Emptying the entire machine?
Yes, I'd have emptied it all and I'd have gone back the next day.
Okay, all right. Well, are you as forgiving? It's the people's verdict, please. 61054. The first word is Simon. What do you want to say to Steph? 61054. First word is Simon. The people's verdict. Here's the people's verdict like this.
Forgiven, says Jules. 100% agree with Matt. 50p pizzas are now so small. Always dairy milk over fruit and nut, though. John says not forgiven. She stole from the vending machine. That's not allowed. Also, did she really need to take all the food from the machine? And finally, Joshua in Lowestoft says totally forgiving tonight's confession because it's the system to blame. Because the machine wasn't working properly. Matt's right again. Lol. Have a great night. Great show as always.
The new Confessions podcast will have an interesting thing in it because there's a confession that was sort of inappropriate to have on the show.
Oh, yes.
But was actually worth reading out in full.
Definitely worth it.
Was it?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. It's a little bit dodgy, I have to say.
Yeah.
Might make you wince just a bit. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there goes the trolley. So what have we selected from the trolley, Suze?
I've selected 3 ice-cold Diet Cokes.
Actually, that's very good. And can I just say Diet Coke is much better than Coke Zero, in my opinion. But if you go to France, you can only get Coke Zero. This is not a good thing, and they need to sort that out.
Do they?
Yes, they do.
Matt would probably want vodka or whiskey or rum in
That's
his.
true.
Yeah, why not?
That's true.
Just have a Diet Coke.
With some vodka. Excellent idea.
No. Just a Diet Coke with ice and a slice of lemon. Thank you very much indeed.
Twist of rum. Anyway.
So today's confession comes from Jens the Lens. Thank you, Jens the Lens. Hello to the forgiving collective of candour, foresight and wisdom. I've always enjoyed confessions, particularly any which open with the words, I've recently retired. And for a few years now, I've had something to confess, but fearful of reputational damage, I've held back. However, Father Simon, I've recently retired. For many years, I worked in the glamorous world of sport.
Ooh.
Or as some of Matt's colleagues call it, the games department.
Oh, yeah.
On occasion, I was expected to use a camera to film various events and interviews. This was something I really enjoyed. However, I was never a fully signed up member of the camera collective. I never received the memo setting out the expected etiquette of the pointers going about their daily duties. Cardinal sins such as moving another's tripod was all in a day's work for me until perhaps possibly I went over the edge. The awfulness, which I'm relating here, happened in the summer of 2009, and the women's open golf at Royal Lytham St Anne's. Catriona Matthew was romping to victory. However, play had taken so long that the broadcast was going off air just as soon as the last putt dropped. No time for any interviews nor celebrity shots with Catriona. I wasn't going to let that happen, not on my watch. As we all know, she was the first Scot to win the championship and deserved her moment.
Correct.
I grabbed my camera from the back of the scanner and rushed to find an interviewer. Enter fellow enthusiast and overall good egg, Maureen Medill. We ran to the interview position around the 18th green, and as I set up, Maureen went off to guide Catriona to our spot. It was perfect. The beautiful clubhouse in the background and the sun was behind my left shoulder. Ideal. It was all coming together. I would be a hero. The interview would be shared amongst all outlets, maybe even the 10 o'clock news. It was about then that I realised, and forgive the TV slang here, I was a cable short of an interview. In my haste, I'd grabbed the camera, but not the long cable for the microphone.
Oh, no.
Maureen was leading Catriona towards me. Panic was rising. I would be forced to explain in front of Maureen that we couldn't do the interview. Then, with the golfing gods looking down on me, I spotted about 4 feet of black XLR nicely coiled on the ground beside me. What a break!
Yes.
I'm sure Sister Susie will explain, but it was exactly what I needed. It's the wire that would attach my microphone to the camera.
Yes.
Maureen and I were back in the game. I pretended to fiddle with the camera on the ground so I could subtly absorb the cable into my kit, sticking one end into the microphone and the other into the camera. Hurrah! Maureen and Catriona got going for about 30 seconds or so, and all went well. Maureen's questioning seemed a little in-depth, and there's a chance of an accent here, Father Simon, as Maureen is Northern Irish.
Yes.
Tell us about the first.
Oh, that's a...
What?
I'm not there. Tell us about the first. You set it up nicely for the final round. Did you not?
Did you not?
I felt sure that we'd get a nugget eventually, so I just settled in for the long haul. Just about when my concentration was interrupted by a kerfuffle to my right. Ai Miyazato, who'd finished third, was being led to where we were all standing. Now, for the non-golfers, players from Japan, and particularly their women players, are held in the highest esteem by their media. They are fawned over and circling around that's Miyazato, who I've just mentioned, were about 30 or so Japanese journalists.
Wow.
The whole entourage were led by a fellow who was taking 2 or 3 steps backwards, bowing to Ai, and then ushering everyone over to where we were. Oblivious, Maureen had made it to the 5th. Wind against at the second par 3, Catriona. A real tester for you was the question.
Yes, good question.
I never did hear Catriona's answer as the Miyazato pack had arrived and were being manoeuvred into position. Sweat was beginning to pour, but strangely my blood was running a bit cold as I realised what was about to happen. My Japanese colleague had marked their interview position with their cable, which Maureen was now using. My only hope was for Maureen to finish quickly and I could give him back his cable. Do tell us, Catriona, did you use a 2 or 3 shot at the 7th? Again, Catriona's answer never made it to me, and in fact, neither did her next couple of answers, as I was transfixed by the mime now being performed beside me. The poor bloke was on his hands and knees, searching and searching for his missing cable. He was beating the ground in frustration as it slowly dawned on him that someone had banjaxed his interview. Maureen had made it to the back 9. Eventually, but with another 9 more holes to go, all hope of salvation had vanished. She ploughed on, but my attention was to my right. Blame it on a Scottish education, but I'm not fluent in Japanese, Father Simon, so I've no idea what was being said, but the body language was crystal clear. The poor chap just stood there and hung his head in shame. Miyazato did what all good champions do and stomped off back to the clubhouse. None of the pack got anything. Nothing, not a word. By the time Maureen wound up her extensive review, everyone had gone. I packed up as quickly as I could and put the cable in my camera bag before making a hasty retreat. In memory of the awfulness of this moment, I carried that cable in my camera bag for the rest of my career. Just for full disclosure, Maureen or Catriona knew none of all this, but I do wonder if you can find it in your hearts to forgive what I did to my Japanese colleague who was far from home, surrounded by funny food and under pressure to satisfy demanding employers back home, but denied his scoop by my unscrupulous behaviour. Would this be a bad point to mention that I'm available for hire?
Yes, it would.
Yes.
Says Jens the Lens, with an interesting insight into the world of a live OB from the Women's Golf Championships of 2009. Sister Susie goes first.
Well, this just makes me feel a bit sick, if I'm honest, because I hate the idea that you haven't got what you need and you're recording something and it's just awful. So I do feel for Jens the Lens here, and I can understand what he was going through. However, and you don't know, Maureen, why does she have to go into that much detail with each hole? I don't know. He didn't expect that. I didn't think it was going to be that long, but he did steal the cable. Essentially.
Yes.
So for that reason,
Not gonna
I can't forgive him.
Brother Matthew.
Well, I'm going to forgive. Number one, who marks their position with a cable that you're going to need? You don't do that.
It's Japanese tradition.
Mark it with a bag. That's what everyone else would do. Also, would it have killed Miyazato to just wait around until the other person had finished their interview so she could talk about... She hadn't won anything, so she could have waited around. Also, maybe the Japanese TV should have been a bit more patient. And also, Catriona Matthew had won, so she can go through as many, 18 holes as she likes. So for all of that, konnichiwa to my friends in Japan, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, all right, so we got there. So, people's verdict, please, for Jens the Lens. Do you forgive his sporting OB faux pas as he stole the cable? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. Before the news at 6, we had a confession from Jens the Lens, a story from a golfing outside broadcast in 2009, and an interview with champion golfer Catriona Matthew was going ahead. But to do that, he had to steal a cable from a rival broadcaster, a Japanese broadcaster, which meant that their interview with third place Ai Miyazato was completely, I think his word was banjaxed.
Right.
That's his confession from Jens the Lens. Does he get forgiveness? Here's the people's verdict.
So Mitch Instant Ive says, not forgiven. I feel sorry for the poor chap who didn't have his cable. His interview was ruined. But forgiven, says Steve in New Brighton. I think the old adage, finders keepers, comes into play here. The man did what he had to do.
He did.
Jack in Liverpool says forgiven. I forgive Jens the Lens, as I agree. Who marks their position with a cable? And also, golfers are very arrogant people, so the golfer should have just waited. A little bit harsh, Jack.
Sweeping statements there.
Yeah.
Okay, your confession would be very welcome. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk, and the new podcast arrives tomorrow with a special extra insert of a problematic confession, but you're going to have to get the podcast to find out what's going on there. So here we go with the podcast exclusive, not for broadcast confession, which Susie vetoed from appearing on the actual show.
Yeah.
But he's probably just giving it a bit of time and, with the music and everything.
Okay. I like it.
Yeah.
It's still a little bit.
Yeah, I don't like it.
Really? Wow.
Comes from Stuart in South Wales.
Uh-huh.
Father Simon and the Considering Collective. I'm writing here to confess a less than dignified end given to a member of our family some 15 years ago in the hope of memorialising the goose, or maybe it was a duck. These things come and go.
What?
Wow.
Already unsure.
I'm also in the hope of getting my hands on a confessions-themed mug, if the cupboard of tat has any left to give. There isn't one. There isn't a confessions mug.
Oh, no, there's a youth-themed mug. That's what he's after.
Yeah, it's not a confessions mug, though, is it?
No.
So pay attention, Stuart, in South Wales.
Yeah.
So Stuart says, we grew up with chickens. Pleasant company, intent on stealing food and scratching around. Ducks, quiet company, often intent on really not that much at all. And formerly geese, aggressive company, intent on destruction and vocalising their displeasure with all people and most things.
Love it.
So the seasons passed, with the grey, boggy winters blossoming into green summers, with hard ground and swaying grass, but unchanging was the persistent hate from the geese. It's nice for there to be some constants in the winds of change that we all face. Overwritten, Stuart, but anyway, I'm going for it.
Like it.
The passage of time can be unforgiving to us all, but especially so to our winged friends and foes living in a rural idyll, also being enjoyed by stoats and foxes.
Oh, where's this going?
The mists of time.
Oh, the mists of time's still rolling.
God.
Goodness
Have made
me.
the exact cause of death in this case murky. But suffice to say, it came for our friend the goose to meet her maker. With heavy hearts and spade. So the goose
The goose is
died.
dead.
So
The goose is dead.
Yeah.
Natural causes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Long live the goose.
And so on.
Yeah.
With heavy hearts and spade, pick and mattock in hand, my father and I set out to lay our friend the goose to her final resting place. The ground of summer was hard going at times, and we were busy digging this hole, and 2 feet deep it was dug, but stones and roots prevented us going much further. It was very hard going. The goose placed within in dignified repose. When laid into the hole, it suddenly seemed alarmingly close to the surface, and this goose was in reach of hungry foxes and badgers.
Oh.
Now, what would the collective do in the very common predicament presented? Dig deeper? Can't be good for the trees to chop out those roots and all the rocks. Dig somewhere else, not all over again, not in this heat. Contact a fallen stock collector, send her to the food recycling? No. Now this, Father Simon and the Collective, is what I seek forgiveness for. To jump once on a departed goose,
What?
to bed it deeper in a hole, would be a little disrespectful, though maybe effective. On finding out that said jump elicited a honk from beyond the grave, I jumped again and unnecessarily, each adding to the chorus, breaking through our sadness at the moment,
Breaking through our sadness, through the mists of time.
but leaving a long trail of unease these past 15 years. I throw myself upon the mercy of the court and await your judgment. I mean, you can... So the goose was dead.
The goose is dead already.
So there's been, to be absolutely clear, there's been no cruelty to animals.
No.
But the issue was, what do you do when the goose is a little bit too full and there isn't enough space in the ground?
Yeah.
We just dig another hole,
Well,
don't you?
that's what I thought. Yeah.
Okay, let's do this properly. Susie, what do you say to Stuart in South Wales?
I say Stuart should have dug another hole, and I don't forgive him because I just think it. You know, I know he didn't kill the goose, but it was unnecessary. And the fact that he honked, he jumped on him twice to get another honk, unforgivable.
Yeah, not good. Not good.
Sister Holly.
Well, a goose did poo on my head once when it flew by, and so there was a part of me that thought maybe I should forgive this. But jumping
Didn't
on
do it
the
on
goose,
purpose. Maybe
I
it did do it
know,
on purpose.
maybe it did though. They say it's good luck. It's not though, is it? It's
No.
just bad luck.
No.
But I think the thing is, the fact that you jumped on the goose and it honked, maybe the goose is a ghost. That's what I'm just saying.
The goose is a ghost.
The goose
Why?
is a
The
ghost. Ghost
A goose, as it's known.
Because
Goose. Very
it
good.
honked. It honked and it was dead.
Well, it has...
Explain that to
Do
me.
we know it was definitely
Yeah,
dead though?
explain that.
so
Dr.
that's
Clark.
why
Because
I'm
there
not
was
forgiving.
clearly, it was dead, but there was still air in the system.
No.
It's like a trumpet.
Well, it definitely wasn't still alive.
Like bagpipes. It's like bagpipes. If you jump on bagpipes, it's going to go... "Blah."
It's
an angry goose.
Angry goose.
It's propped back from the grave.
Back
That's
from
a
the grave.
ghost. And so that's
Yeah.
why I'm not forgiving.
Goose ghost.
Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah. I would forgive on this because, you know, circle of life, the goose is dead. And also, sounds like the goose wasn't much fun when it was alive. And at least it's bringing us joy in death, isn't it? And isn't that what it's all about?
Is it?
Life with the honking goose jumping on top of the bagpipes. So for that reason, I would have forgiven.
Stuart, thank you very much for
Yep.
the entertainment. You don't
Yes.
get a smart speaker, just to be absolutely clear about that.